I love that you even kind of have brought up gender and scent because I think it's so fascinating that like learning that cologne really is just kind of this masculine identifier or to like just not say you have perfume on. And it kind of reminds me of like how now there's all like the male scented sections of Bath and Body Works, or right there's these men's line for shampoo even, and it's like wait, but this is
It's still
I don't
perfume.
yeah,
It's
it's still perfume.
cologne
And
means
yeah,
cologne means like a concentration of scent. It does not mean man perfume. It means
yes.
how much scent is in the perfume.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So, I'm so excited to return to Dark Academia meets Murder Mystery, meets so many novels we've had on this podcast. So, add this to your next read because you have to. After you listen to Lara describe the novel base notes, you're going to want to read it right away. So, first, let me introduce the special guest. Lara Elena Donnelly. I went over Lara's name a few times, so we're good. Is the author of Base Notes, which I'm here to ask all questions about, but is also the author of the Nebula, Lambda, and Locus nominated trilogy. I hope I say this right, Lara, but correct me if I'm wrong. The Amber Luff dossier. Oh,
We went over my name and then you hit the book title and we're like, oh no. Um, it's okay. This is like one of the most commonly asked questions about this book. It's called the Amber Lowe dossier.
ooh.
Um, there's actually a YA author whose name is Amber Lowe, which I did not know when I was writing this book, but she gave me a great little mnemonic device for it, which is it's low like dough.
Oh, low like dough. Oh, I like that rhyming pattern. Okay, thank you. Um, we've talked about her MFA teaching at Sarah Lawrence College, and my affinity towards that college, as well as catapult classes in New York. I just have to ask, what are catapult classes?
So Catapult is like they do a lot of short-term workshops in creative writing and like fiction and poetry and memoir. And so you can take like a 6 week class with them or like a 4 week class. They might do like 1 day workshops. And they kind of build themselves as like an alternative to getting like a full-time MFA. So I've taught some creative writing classes with them.
Oh, okay. Shout out to Catapult. Uh, and the Alpha SF/F/H workshop for young writers. Basically, this whole interview, I'm just gonna have you break down your bio for us now. But what is it science fiction, I'm assuming?
Yeah, science
Okay.
fiction, fantasy, and horror.
Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of all makes sense where base notes is centering around. Um, in the summer, she wears the cobra and the canary. I'm assuming this is a perfume. Okay.
Yeah, it's a perfume by imaginary authors.
Oh. And then in the winter, how do you pronounce it? Nuda
Do
florum?
flora.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's an that's a
Very
magic
fancy.
perfume. It's really beautiful.
Oh. And then others in between. So a lot of sense happening. And that's where we're going to go right away after I get, through this other element of the bio that I'm really questioning and curious. So she lives on the grounds of the old Hamilton estate. Um, so do you actually live in an estate or is this I was so drawn. I'm like, wait, Lara lives in an estate in Manhattan? What's
I
going
wish
on?
I lived in an estate. I would turn the camera to show you my like living slash dining room slash also kitchen. But it's super messy, so we're not going to do that. But we live in Hamilton Heights, which is a neighborhood in Harlem that is on Alexander Hamilton's old estate. We actually live very close to his house, which is still here, and you can tour it. It's been moved twice, so it's not in the same place that it used to be. They moved it the first time with horses and wagons, the second time using like, backhoes and trailers. But we live kind of where the old chicken coop used to be. Like they have a map of the estate at the museum that's in the basement of the house. So we went and looked at it and sort of found our apartment sort of where the chickens used to live is where we are.
Oh, wow. No, that's what I love about Manhattan, though, is even in Washington Heights, I'm not going to remember the family, but there's also an estate in Washington Heights and
There's
Inwood.
the Morris Jumel mansion is up in
Yes.
Washington Heights, which is actually, so this is very fun to me.
Yeah.
Um, Aaron Burr married the widow uh, of the Morris Jumel family, and his house is on a hill that's like slightly higher than the house that Hamilton's house is on. I'm sorry if you can hear my cat. She has those Fluent Pet buttons that she presses to talk, and she keeps pressing the all done button for some reason. She's staring at me, going, "All done, all done." Maybe she's like, "Stop recording this podcast and play with me."
Yeah, she wants some attention, but that's okay.
So anyway, Aaron Burr married this widow who had an estate on a hill slightly higher than Hamilton's house, so that he could, I assume, look down on Hamilton's house from his new mansion.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can go tour that one too.
yeah, some ego play. Well, masculinity came in a lot of forms during the Revolutionary period. But I also just love that you have a small mask and mantle tabby. Well, the cat made her appearance, pretentiously named after a bitter Italian aperitif. So, what is your cat's name?
Her name is Cokie,
Oh,
or Cokie Americano, which always is fun at the vets because we go in. I should have known this as someone with a name that regularly gives people a little bit of pause. I should have been like, we need to name the cat something easy to pronounce. But instead, we named her Cokie, and we go in and they go, Kachi? Coochie?
Coochie. That's the best one.
Yeah, but her name was Cokie Americano, and when we first got her, I posted a bunch of photos of her on Instagram and tagged them all Cokie Americano, which is why I am now followed by the like Italian liquor brand that makes Cokie Americano.
It's a good Instagram marketing brand
I'm like,
influencer for them.
I would love a sponsorship.
I think you should. Okay.
The reason that she's named this, sorry, I'm now I don't know. Do you post the videos of this on YouTube?
I
Or
do. So this is going to be intriguing. It kind of looks like Lara's holding a whip.
I just realized as I brought it on camera, I was like, "Oh, this looks bad." This is our cat's favorite toy. It's sort of like rainbow suede
Oh.
strips on the end of a stick. We call it her spaghetti stick, but it does look a little not like a cat toy.
No, I thought maybe this was like the BDSM performance art. I'm like, wherever you want to go, Lara, to promote your book bass notes, I am following.
It's relevant, right? It feels relevant.
It does.
Uh,
It does. So, like, what I love first is I was saying to Lara, Caitlin Starling, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing, so listen to that episode, um, recommended Lara your book because it does have very similar dark academia vibes. I was really intrigued because I'm a Stephen Sondheim fan, and Caitlin went into the Sweeney Todd relevance, and I'm like, wait, there's a novel that has that type of cannibalistic murder type genre thing going on, and yeah, I'm just so intrigued. First, just what inspired, not even maybe the narrative, but just inspired your love of sense and following this as a pathway.
I feel like my interest in perfume kind of crept up on me. I don't even really remember how I got started on this. I can't remember if it was discovering imaginary authors, which is like a niche perfumery that creates perfumes based on novels that don't exist. So like they invent authors and novels, and then create perfumes to sort of evoke these fictional pieces of fiction. And I can't remember if I discovered them and started getting into perfume, or if I read this article by Jude Doyle, called like my search for the great American perfume, or my quest for the great American perfume, that was all about how like historically American perfumes had been super clean and like hygienic and not really intriguing in the way that a lot of European classic perfumes could be. Like they didn't have any sort of like animalic or funky or musky notes. They were all about like smelling clean. Um, and so I read this article. I started getting interested in this perfume house, and I just started ordering samplers. And this was back in like probably the winter of 2014, maybe like early spring 2015. It was no, you know what? It was before that because I started researching perfumes while I was writing Amberlow because a lot of people were wearing perfume or wearing like scented products. Or I'd be like, historical men's hair pomade. What did it smell like? And I had to be able to describe compelling scents. And so I was looking into a lot of like vintage perfume and like what kinds of scents different kinds of people wore. And I started to get really interested. And actually, the first set of samples that I bought was from Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, which is like super nerdy, dark, sexy sort of company that does a lot. They do a lot of like perfumes inspired by like Lupercalia or like the Sandman comics, you know, like very weird, sexy, nerdy stuff. And so I ordered some samples from them and then was off to the races. But it was like I didn't care about perfume as a sort of like industry or entity necessarily. It was like, oh, perfume as something that my characters wear, or like I need to know about this, not for me or my own enjoyment, but because it's sort of like a piece of my writing research. And then all of a sudden I was like, actually, I'm really interested in this. It crept up on me.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily that you wanted to find everything about Coco Chanel or like, okay, you weren't
No,
trying to
it
think
was
of
much
all the
more,
French perfumery history.
no, it was much more like, okay, I have a character who's giving another character a gift of perfume in this scene. What kind of sorry, she's laid down on her button and is rolling around. So I have this scene where a character is giving another character a gift of perfume, and I was like, what kind of perfume would, you know, this very educated, wealthy man be giving to this woman who, like, it had to be a gift that made her feel a little like not good enough, but also sort of like as an open door to like, this is what your life could be like, you know, if you spend time with this person. So it was like, if she wears cheap perfume, what is that cheap perfume? And if he is giving her better perfume, what is that better perfume? And something about writing this scene just sort of, I think, opened a door to me to be like, wow, there's so many messages in scent, and it informs so much about how we experience the world. And actually, so I had COVID in May, and I lost my sense of smell for probably like a month, and it was really horrible. It made the world feel like I was living in a really realistic computer simulation, which was incredibly uncanny and upsetting because I couldn't smell anything. And I was like, oh, you don't realize how much your sense of smell is informing your experience of your life until you don't have it anymore. And then you're like, oh my God, everything feels fake. And I feel like I can't touch anything. Even if I'm touching stuff, it doesn't feel real because it doesn't have scent.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love how right away in your novel with Bass Notes that I was saying to Lara, it's this very immersive experience where in your intro prologue, um, we, the reader, are instantly brought into the scene of the crime or what seems like a very murder crime scene. We don't know exactly what's happening, right? We're just given a little taste.
Bad things are happening.
Bad things are happening. We know a body's being maybe buried. And right away, though, scent is so instrumental even before your intro because we get a really, I thought, intriguing. I don't see this a lot in a novel. The Bass Notes Soli Flore discovery set. And we have the heroes of the novel, we have the villains, we have the incidentals, but we get really the notes of what they desire in scent and what they would desire in a cologne, perfume. Um, so I thought it's so interesting to really connect their scent to their personality. And it makes so much
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
No,
Like,
go ahead for it. Yeah, yeah.
so this was actually this opening of the Soliflores is like an element that is it's not supposed to do anything. It's just supposed to be there for readers to experience it, I guess. But the thought is like um there's a broader formal conceit about the book and the way that it works and the way that it is sort of like enfolding the reader into it and making them sort of like complicit and close with the narrator, that the Soliflore set at the beginning is like the first hint that you get that this book is not necessarily just that you're going to be reading a story, that there is like there's like a participatory part, where like you as the reader are engaging with the text in like a slightly closer way than just as someone consuming the story.
Yeah, and I love how it works because consensually, I'm thinking, wait, did I agree to being part of this murder scene? And not having that third person observation really breaking down into first person right away made me uncomfortable in an exciting way. Like I realized, oh, this is going to be a really inventive murder mystery. Like there's something even off about how you're telling the narrative in new ways. Like it's not, and what I love is it doesn't follow the breadcrumbs of step one, step two, step three of putting together the murder scene, which, I'm sure too, you love those novels as well. Like where you can kind of expect, okay, there's going to be a big climactic moment, all the revelations happen, but your novel really shifts away from that traditional pathway and the traditional chronology. So like I'm assuming you were really thinking you're going to kind of go off the trail of how to tell a murder.
um I think one of the big inspirations for this book, two of the big inspirations for this book, were Donna Tartt's The Secret History and also Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley. And both of those are books where like the who done it part is not the most interesting part, not the big reveal. It's sort of more about like why done it and also what comes after. Like the murder is not the like linchpin of the whole story. I mean, it is in a way, but it's not a linchpin in the sort of like solving the murder is the big question.
Yeah.
The question is more like, once you've murdered someone, what does that mean? And like, what are you going to do about it? So I think one of the reasons that it's not like a 1, 2, 3, here's the murder, here's the big climactic fallout from the murder. It's much more like, all right, this person murders people, and now things are going to go wrong for them.
Yeah. And I just recently, a few months ago, when Death on the Nile came out, based on Agatha Christie's novel, it was actually really interesting to watch. Well, not just because Armie Hammer was in it, but it's all, I forgot about that. But yeah, which I guess does relate to this narrative. But uh I was really it was so interesting to see a film that followed the generic murder mystery because I hadn't seen it in a while, right? Like we've had so many inventive ways to tell a murder mystery that of course though, I love that Agatha Christie style, but like you said, the murder is usually it's in the title, usually um we're trying to figure out the clue like suspects, like who did what in what room, and you're like the Clue board game, you have your paper and you're just trying to detail everything you know about the case. What I really love though is how New York City itself, and I know Lara's coming from New York City, talked about Hamilton Heights. New York is actually a really interesting character in a way. And I was kind of curious because like everything that Vic, our protagonist, does is not just that they're in New York, but really like smelling everything in, say, the opera house, or smelling things on the streets, in the transit system, um, the restaurants, right? So I'm assuming New York, it plays such a role as a center for your novel, for
Well,
the
like,
smell.
first of all, first of all, if you're in New York and you're walking around in the streets, you cannot avoid smelling. Like, it's sometimes you want to avoid smelling. You cannot. um, but also, this novel is based on a short story that I wrote in 2015, right after moving to New York. Like, the month that I moved to New York, I was supposed to be working on a short story for a charity anthology, and the theme was orange. And I had relatively recently read that Jude Doyle article that's all about like clean American perfumes, and one of the like notes cited as being really common in American perfumes was orange blossom, because it smells so fresh and citrusy and like clean. Um, and I was like, oh, I could use that as part of this like orange theme, and got the idea for the story literally in Pittsburgh. Like, the morning I was leaving Pittsburgh, I just finished teaching at a workshop there, and I had my suitcase in the back of my car. I was moving to New York City, and I was like, oh, okay, it can be like about a story about a perfumer. And that was kind of all I had, was that it was a story about a perfumer and someone who was involved with that perfumer. And I got to New York and I had to write this story, and I was like, well, I'm just going to set it in New York, because I mean, if it's about perfume, it kind of, I don't want to say it has to be set in one of the sort of major metropolitan areas of the world, but and there are a lot of perfumers who aren't in the major metropolitan areas of the world, but I think there was something about the like huge economic gap between the characters, and sort of like the like performative wealth, the performative class, that felt very New Yorky to me. And like, having just moved here with this character who had also kind of just moved here and was trying to figure out where they fit into this whole situation. I ended up writing it set in New York, like right when I had first moved here. And so it was very interesting, after having lived here for like 6 or 7 years, to be like, okay, I'm going to revisit this. And also, the character has now been here a little longer. Like, the short story takes place before the novel takes place. It's sort of like a prequel. And revisiting this and being like, okay, now that you've lived in New York for a while and have had much more like intimate experiences with the way that it can be so horrible but also so magical, it's like it allowed me to explore with more intensity the same themes that I found really interesting in the short story.
Yeah. And I really have been connecting a lot to your novel based on, well, memory. And we'll talk about, right, sense and memory. There's so much written in psychology, um, about how sense can trigger your past memories, and it's used in therapy a lot. So, were you, did you have to do a lot of research to really kind of connect the psychology of your characters to the intersection between sense and memory?
So the intersection between scent and memory in the book actually came because I knew that I wanted to turn this short story into something longer, and I knew that I wanted it to have like a little bit more of a speculative element, because the original short story didn't. It was pure like weird sort of psychosexual thriller. I don't even know what genre I would call it. It was published in a horror magazine, so I guess we'll call it horror. Um, but I was like, okay, for a longer novel, I want to introduce a speculative element of some kind. What would it be? And like, what magic or speculative element feels most adjacent to perfume? And because I already was familiar with the idea that scent is like a really strong memory trigger. I mean, like, you don't even have to read research
Mhm.
to know that, you know, like we experience that all the time where we'll be walking around and go, so the smell that I just smelled, wherever it came from, reminded me so strongly of something I hadn't thought of in forever, or like this smells just like something from my childhood. Um, so like I hadn't read that much research about it, but I just knew it for a fact as like part of my experience of living as a human in the world and being someone who has a pretty strong sense of smell, or at least like I think about my sense of smell a lot. I value it. I use it a lot. And it's very startling to me when I find out that other people like don't, or like can't smell that the milk is sour, or like don't notice a smell in the air. Or like they're drinking a wine and they're like, I can't, it just smells like wine. And I'm like, what? You mean you can't smell all this other stuff going on? Um, so when I wanted to turn it into a novel, I was like, all right, I need a speculative element, and perfume and scent in general is like such a strong memory trigger. And uh I don't know if this is really like a spoiler, but you know, the short story ends with, you know, someone getting turned into a perfume. And I was like, well, we're keeping that. We're keeping the people perfumes. Uh and so I was like, all right, if you're making a perfume with a human body and the speculative element has to do with memory, like how are those things connected? Like, why do you need a human body? What kind of memories is that smell going to trigger? And then we were kind of off to the races. I don't know if that answered your question at
Oh
all.
yeah, absolutely. And well, just for everyone out there, bass notes. I mean, I'm going back to my time in Paris when I actually went to oh, I'm trying to remember that large museum, but it was just
A lot of museums in Paris. I
I
don't think
know.
I can help you
I
with this.
know. And there was one, well, there's the like perfumery museum, and they actually have you like make your own perfume, and you learn about base notes. And actually what's interesting is when you mention orange, I remember learning orange is actually the scent that doesn't stay the longest because it kind of it diffuses quickly in the air, which is why I'm really kind of into essential oils and my diffuser. And usually I have to put lemongrass because that has more of like a longer stay. But I do love the orange scent. I like that clean, fresh scent. But I guess base notes, right? Are they the ones that they're the ones that will carry the other scents that are lighter that really can't exist by themselves?
They're they're more about sort of the architecture of the perfume. Um, so there's like I'm trying to remember now. There's longevity, which is how long the scent lasts. There's sillage, which is how far
Mm.
it is sort of like projecting. Um, and the sort of like base note, middle note, top note is not exactly about how long each note lasts, like the longevity of each note. Though it can be. Like I've seen it talked about this way, but I've also seen it talked about not as not as the dry down. So the dry down is when you put a perfume on and it's like, this is what you smell first. And then that goes away. And then you smell something else. And then that can go away. And it goes through the perfume goes through a bunch of chemical changes and it dries down to whatever its sort of like final form is. And then it eventually totally breaks down and goes away. The top notes, the middle notes, and the base notes, or in French, the head notes and the heart notes and the base notes, which is what we call them in the book. Like at the beginning of every chapter, it's like note de tête, note de queue, and note de fond.
Mhm, mhm.
That's more about like when you smell the perfume, it is about where in the structure of the scent you notice that particular note. So, like, if you had something that had like a lemongrass top note, lemongrass is so bright and piercing that you might smell it first. But it could also be, depending on how the perfume is put together, it could be kind of slipped in between some other top note and like something deeper. It could also be like a base note. It's really sort of about how the perfumer wants you to experience the scent, and less about like what order you smell things in.
Mm-hmm,
I feel like
mm-hmm.
I'm not really describing this well, because it's one of those things that's very hard to describe about the experience of smelling something. Like it's a sense that kind of defies description in a lot of ways. It's very slippery, and I think that's because it's so visceral. You're just like, oh, I'm smelling all this stuff, and my brain is like interpreting it
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
in a way that is beyond my ability to talk about.
Yeah, and that's why it's a chemistry. I mean, um, chemists go in and they become perfumers, and there's so much to it. That's why I love though that you chose this chemistry art. I would call it an art. This art of science with scent, and um how that develops throughout your novel, but also why I think it works so well for the twists. And I mean, you gave us a little spoiler, but I think we kind of know there's going to be something tied to perfume and death uh, from the beginning. But I'm kind of curious, um, and I'll pivot this into your novel because I think it does play a role. Like when people they don't realize that art that you so I think expertly described, Lara, which is the base, the middle, the top, that like what you smell right away is not going to last, but there's going to be something else. Even when you put on body lotion and like depends how much you lather on and right there's a whole where you put it, the trigger points. And the same goes for when someone sprays perfume cologne like 5 times and they're like, "Wait, but I can't smell it right away." But they're not realizing everyone around them is smelling it in a more intense way. And I think we've all had that experience. This just happened to me like at a restaurant where someone walks by and I'm like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
that really has hit me." Like, and not in a there's the walk by someone on the street and you're like, "Oh, that's really pleasant." Like, I love those moments. Even with hair gel, you're right. That has a scent. Shampoo. Um, and yeah, that overpowering sense is not always pleasant. So, did you enjoy playing around with how the characters, especially Vic, was going to um be using their art of perfume in a way to kind of intensify how they saw personalities of the people around them? And now, a message from the Gay and Lesbian Review.
Hello, listeners. This is Stephen Hemrick, the publisher of the G&LR, here with a special offer just for you. For those of you who aren't familiar with the G&LR, let me provide a little background. The GLR is a bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics that publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines, as well as a slew of reviews of books, plays, and movies, and a number of special features such as artists' profiles and the popular art memo column. Each issue brings you consistently intelligent, lively, thought-provoking articles focused on a unifying theme and brings together the leading minds on the topic. You won't find a lot about the latest dating fads or fashion trends, though you might find articles about online dating as a social phenomenon or the gay influence on 20th century fashion. For example, the theme of the current issue is Queens and Kings, and it features an article by Andrew Holleran about Truman Capote's relationships with glamorous women, the women he called his swans. Now for the special offer. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. That's 7 issues instead of 6. Visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org. Click subscribe and enter promo code ITBR for your free issue. And as an added bonus, you'll receive online access to all archived issues of the magazine.
Hi, it's Mary from True Crime and Academia.
If you're like me, you love personalized merch and you love shopping local. So here is one of my favorite local vendors to buy from. It's Mandy Made It. That's Mandee, Made It. My friend Mandy makes the most incredible personalized crochet goods and decor for your home. spooky season is coming up. She has some of the coolest Halloween designs. So go follow her on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Mandy Made It. Again, that's MANDEE Made It. And place your order with her today.
I think it's less about intensifying personalities and more about like the world is legible to Vic through scent more than any other sense. And so I think noticing the way that people smell is going to be like one of the first things that they notice. And also noticing what people have done to change their smell. Like the characters who wear scent or interact with scent in some way, I don't know if this is explicit in the text, but in my head, and I think kind of in the way that Vic interacts with these other characters, I'm specifically thinking of Beau, who is like a tailor that Vic befriends in the sort of like calculated befriending of other down and out broke millennial artists to use them and their talents for ill. Vic meets this tailor named Beau, and one of the first things that Vic notices about him is that he's wearing perfume. And I think as like a perfumer, Vic is really keyed into like this person made a choice to put a scent on their body. And what does that say about them? First of all, Vic appreciates it because, you know, not a lot of people wear perfume these days, or not like, you know, people wear all kinds of scented products, but I think people are like, oh, perfume is like fancy, or like, I can't wear this because, you know, it will give people migraines, even if you're wearing like insanely scented body lotion, whatever. I think like we're in a time where, you know, I have no evidence to back this up. This is purely my feelings about it. Like in the past, everything was scented and people like bathed in perfume, and like there was a lot of sort of like social cachet attached to perfume. There still is social cachet attached to perfume. Basically what I'm saying is that I feel, based on zero evidence, that people don't wear perfume as much as they used to. Used to being some nebulous point in the past. Again, absolutely making all of this up. Probably this is Vic inside of my head being like, people don't appreciate my art like, you know, they should. So when someone is actually wearing perfume, especially an interesting perfume, Vic is like, this is something I can appreciate about you. And even when people are not wearing perfume, so like Jane, who is the love interest, isn't wearing perfume when Vic meets her for the first time, but she is wearing like, she's used like peppermint soap, and her body lotion smells like coconut, and she's working in a bar, and she's got like, you know, I think she has like a vinegar shrub like on her fingers, so they smell a little sour, and she's like sweaty because she's been at work all day. And so Vic smells all these things about her, and also notices that she's not wearing perfume, and is kind of like, oh, you don't, like, they're talking about it, and Vic is like, oh, you don't wear perfume, and Jane is like, no, you know, I don't, but my partner does. But it's basically like the first thing that Vic notices about people is what they smell like and whether they meant to smell like that or not.
Yeah, I love that you even kind of have brought up gender and scent, because I think it's so fascinating that like learning that cologne really is just kind of this masculine identifier, or to like just not say you have perfume on. And it kind of reminds me of like how now there's all like the male scented sections of Bath and Body Works, or right, there's these men's line for shampoo even, and it's like, wait, but this is
It's still
I don't
perfume.
yeah, it's still perfume.
Cologne means like a concentration of scent. It does not mean man perfume. It means how much scent is in the perfume.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes I really stay away from some of the more like male identified, because it's musk and like I like sandalwood, but sometimes it's whoa, this is intense. I think we've all smelled like some of those products, and they're not always pleasant again, but everyone's gonna, right? If someone's wearing that and you smell it, um you're probably like, a lot of the public would attach it to I don't know, something with masculinity. So I'm really curious how you really look into gender relations and sexual relations through scent, because I thought that was such an interesting angle that you bring up throughout the novel.
Yeah. Wow, I'm trying to make the connection between like, yeah, I decided this was going to be like a super queer novel. How does that play into the fact that it's also a novel about perfume? And now I'm like questioning a lot of my own sort of like, did you do this unconsciously? Did you? Because I certainly wasn't like, yeah, queer people and perfume, like it's all about gender performance and etc. Um, but it totally, there are parts of the book that totally are about, this is the way that a man smells. They're like the villains, air quotes, of this book are all sort of like older, very wealthy men who work in like corporate finance, who have really strong ideas about like, this is what a man is supposed to smell like. And Vic, who has worked for all of them at one point or another, doing like custom perfume blends, is always kind of pushing back on it. And part of actually what I learned doing research for this book is there's like a sub community of perfume people called frag bros, or like fragrance bros. And they actually are really into perfumes that they call beast mode perfumes, which are actually like big florals. They're very like sticky, sweet, and overpowering. They're very like, you will know the minute that I walk into the room because you will smell me. But it's not like that vetiver or sandalwood. I mean, a lot of them will be like sandalwood and rose, right? But like, it's not like the smell of Old Spice. It's like the smell of a boudoir, basically. But also, I think just like a lot of the scents that Vic puts together are not gendered really, and they're also not ways that people would want to smell. I guess they're like nerd perfumes, right? So they're like, I don't want to evoke femininity. I want to evoke wet pavement or like, burnt rubber. Like I want to evoke a memory or a sensation or like an aesthetic, and not, I want to evoke sexy or happy or girly or manly. It's like, I want to evoke for you an image, which is like some of my favorite perfumes are, I want to evoke an image. I want to evoke a moment. I want to evoke a feeling. Which I think, and it's like a story, right? You're telling a story about yourself or about your feelings by choosing to smell a certain way. And some people choose to use that power to say something about their gender.
Yeah, no, I think there really is a queerness about scents, like especially the more you were talking about like Vic not expecting a certain smell from a male body, that I'm raising a lot of questions in my mind that, oh, that's right, you can really sense really can speak to your identity, speak to how you want to portray yourself. And yeah, I think there's a whole work done about, there should be someone who like just looks into queering perfumery.
I mean,
But
I'm sure there are a couple people. One of the things that I read while I was doing research for this, and like on my computer quick trying to find it so that I can remember the actual title, but it's an academic paper. Yes, here we go. It's called Skank, or The Queer Fascination with Animalic Notes. And it's an academic paper about like queerness and like sexuality and like the abject, and how this translates into sort of like queer perfumery and its fascination with like the nastier smells in a perfumer's catalog, which is what Vic is all about, right? Vic is like, like perfume that's made from real civet, right? Scraped from the real testicles of a real cat. Like, Vic is very into bodily, nasty smells that make you go, ugh,
Yeah.
but you're into it. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you brought up Patricia Highsmith because I think it really helps to think about when I think about Patricia Highsmith, I always think also of Hitchcock and that like psychosexual, especially because of Strangers on a Train, which is adapted right from Highsmith. And when you watch a Hitchcock film, what I always love is the visceral of how each scene really portrays scent. Like you really are, even take Strangers on a Train, and these two men are so connected bodily on their passenger seat. Automatically, I'm thinking, okay, well, what are they picking up? Is there musk tones? And like Hitchcock was so interested in those psychological moments of the frame of the camera picking this up. So, when I'm looking into your novel, it makes sense that you're so like you were such a Patricia Highsmith lover. And like, is there any other maybe expected, unexpected inspiration for bass notes that, you want to reveal to us all?
Oh man. Unexpected inspiration for bass notes. I mean, this is not even unexpected. This is actually like maybe the deepest and most motivating and inspiring connection is that when I was really little, not really little, like, but definitely a child, my dad told me about this book, Perfume, the Story of a Murderer. And he gave me all the details of the plot of Perfume, the Story of a Murderer. And I did not read it until I was working on the short story that became Bass Notes. But I knew about it, like broad strokes, for a long time. And so when I started to conceive of the short story, I was like, oh, maybe this can be in conversation with this book that I have not read that I guess I should probably read before I read the story. So my first couple of weeks in New York were spent reading Perfume, the Story of a Murderer on the subway as I went around looking for an apartment. And that is all about nasty smells. I mean, it's about beautiful smells too, but it opens with the main character being born and abandoned as an infant in a fish market. And it's like fish guts and blood and like dirty diapers, and it's just like it's horrible. But the main character Lee like doesn't distinguish really between good and bad smells. It's just like all intense. All the smells are really intense, and he's smelling them all the time. And so when I was working on this book, I was like, okay, this is like Perfume, but not. It's not like a retelling, but it is a book that is very much in the tradition of books about like super smellers who don't really distinguish between good and bad, and like the art for them is the highest pursuit, above and beyond the morality of murdering people. They're like, yeah, I know murder is bad, but sometimes you need to do it to get the right elements for your artwork.
Oh my, it's almost like American Psycho.
Yeah,
Kind
actually,
of.
American Psycho was a movie and a book that people kept telling me like, oh, it's like this, and I hadn't read or watched it because I really don't like horror movies.
Oh, okay.
My mom had been like, I couldn't even get through like the first 15 minutes. I turned it off, and I was like, I don't know, it'll probably freak me out. I probably don't want to watch it. Probably don't want to read the book. And about 4 months ago, I think my partner and I actually sat down and watched American Psycho. And I was like, this is hysterically funny, and I love every minute of it. But also my partner was like, your book is like a cross between American Psycho and Frances Ha. And so we did watch Frances Ha while I was writing it, because it's all about like, the hustle. It's all about the hustle and trying to pursue your dream and getting sidetracked by, trying to keep up with your wealthy friends and like trying to make it in New York and feeling this pressure to like be special and succeed and be a superstar, or like be 30 under 30, like to the insane pressure that everyone who lives here who is an artist feels to A, survive, and B, thrive.
Yeah. Well, and because I brought up the cinematic, I mean, there's one moment that just sticks out to me because of how, again, realistic, how you blend realism and also fantasy in your novel. And that's the bar scene when Vic is seeing the bartender, basically the men ogling her, and then I think they throw something into her blouse.
Yeah.
Like a cherry.
There's so many bar scenes in this book. Like every scene in this book takes place at a bar. But yeah, the scene where the creepy guy drops a cherry down Jane's cleavage. Yes. What about it? It's
well,
horrible.
no, just that, like, it really shows a lot, I think, in that moment of how Vic responds internally, like processing for us all, the disgust she feels towards these men. And like, there's a lot of, I love that you start to build that, you build the anticipation for what's to come with Vic, like kind of already planting the seeds for us. So, but again, it's so cinematic, like very visceral. And I just hope that this comes into some cinematic form, something visual happens to Base Notes. Can you hint at anything?
I would love for that to happen. I was actually talking to a friend who's kind of like tangential to the movie and TV business, and was like, who should I send it to? Like, who are some producers that might be interested? And he was like, I think this would be a great HBO Max show. And now, of course, it's like, well, too bad. Too bad. It would have been a great HBO Max show, but not anymore. Yeah, I would love for that to happen. If anyone out there is looking to adapt a super queer, extremely murdery, very like visceral, colorful, prestige television show and or movie.
Yeah. Kind of like Midsummer. I feel it was.
I don't like horror
Oh,
movies.
it's so good though. See, I love horror movies. But I think it's what, A24?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I could see it falling in line with that.
I would love an A24 adaptation. Call me A24.
Yeah. Wait, why not HBO Max?
Well, because now they're like, oh, we're not going to do scripted content. They're like, their whole pivot everyone is freaking out about. Were you not on Twitter for this?
No, I was not. I'm like, what happened?
HBO Max merged with Discovery Plus. I think Discovery Plus. And they were like, we're going to move away from scripted original content to like unscripted reality TV. Because they were like, our audience, they had a very strange slide in their shareholders meeting or whatever that was like, teenage girls like unscripted, like real world, relatable TV. They like genre dumbs, big air quotes here. And then they were like, teenage boys, and they were like, and they're the Discovery Plus audience. Teenage boys like scripted drama with like action, and they're into like fandoms, big air quotes again. And like every nerd that I knew was like, do you know who built the concept of fandom? It was not teenage boys. Like, it was not teenage boys at all. Do you know about fan fiction? That is not teenage boys either. Like, I'm sure there are teenage boys involved in that, but they are not the people who are like driving it, or like driving fanishness or fandoms. So it was just a very strange, like, admittedly, I am in my little Twitter bubble of like writers and nerds and people who would be mad that HBO Max was going to pivot towards like reality TV. But it does feel like more than just my Twitter circle, we're absolutely perplexed and confused by HBO Max, which has been a place where so much really good original content has been like being produced and put out into the world.
Yeah.
like Our Flag Means Death, and there's like
Euphoria,
yeah, and
The
the one
Gilded
about
Age.
the teens who are going on a road trip to get an abortion. Like there's just a bunch of like weird, gay, strange, original stuff that has been on HBO Max. And it's all been like beautiful and really
Yeah.
well produced and has done really well. And they were like, you know what people want is not the stuff that has been doing really well for us. They want like, yeah, unscripted reality TV content.
Hmm. Well, we'll see where that heads.
Yeah, that is why. Too bad, so sad. I do not think that Base Notes will end up at HBO Max.
Oh no. Well, I mean, and I'm trying to think, is it F-Boy Island? Is that HBO Max or Hulu? I don't know. I can't keep it. I don't know. Each of them, each streaming platform has basically the same. Love Island, F-Boy, they're all the unscripted air quotes. But we could get into a whole conversation because sometimes I deep dive the Housewives and
Yeah,
sure, it's unscripted.
I feel like I could like fit in better at work if I watched Real Housewives. But I just have no desire to watch Real Housewives.
Well, if you ever get into the rabbit hole, let me know because I will. I'll chat with you about it. But you know, I was saying to Lara before I hit record that if you love the reading experience, which I always do, but sometimes I really love listening now that we all are kind of in our, pandemic trained audio, depending how much you turn to audio during the pandemic. I love now audiobooks. And I was saying how the performer Avi, right? I think, and you said Avi's last name.
I believe it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. How well done Avi does reading, through Vic's point of view. It's such a great audiobook. So, shout out to Avi.
Shout out to Avi. I specifically was like, I would love to have Avi record this audiobook because I had heard them do, I think they did K.M. Sparrow's Docile. I can't, no, maybe not Docile. I know I listened to some other stuff that they had done and I was like, this is exactly the voice that I want.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of like occupying that like a little bit of vocal fry, gender ambiguous, like deep but has like a higher register. I had a very particular sound in mind. And that sound was like I heard Avi doing some other voice acting and it's like, this is it. This is exactly the sound that I need for this book. So I was very, very excited that they agreed to do it.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you got that input. So exciting to actually see it all come to fruition. So everyone, please, Lara, this was wonderful. I want to give away all the spoilers, but I'm not. I'm gonna hold off, but I'm gonna hold up Base Notes. Such a beautiful cover. By Lara Elena Donnelly. Get your hands on it at any bookstore. I always put the link to bookshop.org. Yes. Yeah. Support the independent bookstores. I have the Audible link too. So if you want to listen to Avi perform it and find out everything about Lara in our show notes, her amazing headshot, which we could have a whole discussion about, but I love how kick-ass it is. Thank you, Lara. Thank you for joining me. And everyone out there, definitely add this to your must list of queer meets dark academic meets murder mystery, thriller, psychosexual. I'm sure there's more.
It has all of the spicy things in it.
It does. Oh, speculative fiction, Lara said.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's got a little something for everybody in
there. Yes. Well, thank you so much. And I can't wait to have you back on, Lara, for your next novel, which I know you're working on, and we're going to finish our writing projects.
All right. I'm holding you to that.
I know. I'll hold you to it too. That's what we have to do as writers. Okay. Thank you, Lara, and thank you everyone out there. Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Welcome to the fall season. The Ivory Tower Boiler Room is a public humanities podcast where we interview writers, scholars, performers, and artists. Episodes air on Mondays. I am Andrew Rimby, the executive director. I'm so happy to welcome my team, Mary DePippi, our chief contributor, Kimberly Dallas, our editor, and an amazing fall group of interns. Thank you to this team. Please follow the Ivory Tower Boiler Room on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Easy to remember. Our Twitter is at Ivory Boiler Room. And we have a whole new design for our Patreon. It is called the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe because you're joining us and eavesdropping on our conversations that are unedited videos of all of our Ivory Tower Boiler Room episodes, as if you're eavesdropping in a cafe, overhearing the conversation. Well, talking about overhearing a conversation, hi, Mary.
Hello, Andrew, and hello, everyone. I'm Mary DePippi, the host of True Crime in Academia, a true crime podcast that is focused mainly on the crimes committed by and to those in the field of academia. Episodes air every Tuesday at noon. You can follow True Crime in Academia on Instagram and TikTok at True Crime in Academia and on Twitter at TC in Academia, because Twitter hates extra characters, as we all know. And as Andrew alluded to earlier, we have a Patreon, and True Crime in Academia has exclusive bonus episodes for subscribers. As a true crime enthusiast, I don't necessarily like to pigeonhole my true crime interests. So over on the Patreon, I cover some of the more high-profile cases not related to academia, such as the murder of JonBenet Ramsey and the case of Casey Anthony. So if you want access to videos like that, go over to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room and become a subscriber.
Thank you all for joining us. And here's to an amazing fall season.
Whoop,
Bye.
whoop.
Bye, everyone.